Hello guys, my name is Hugo, I'm Los Angeles based cinematographer, welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about Red Komodo. When this camera came out, I didn't care much about it. I honestly even thought that I would never buy this camera. I just thought there is so many cameras that are simply better than this, for my workflow at least. And at this point I remember Canon C300 Mark III came out, and I didn't even hesitate for long, and I bought it pretty much right away when it came out to replace my Canon C200. So for almost half a year I didn't even lay my hands on a Komodo, didn't even watch many videos about it, and at some point my friend bought it. And it was my first time to see this camera in person. I saw many pictures of Red Komodo online and everyone was talking about how small it is, but I was truly impressed how small Komodo is. To me it was just very impressive that such a small camera can have such a powerful sensor with internal RAW recording, so I decided to take a closer look and I borrowed this camera for a day to test out. First of all, I wanted to find out if Komodo can actually be a B cam for my Red Weapon Helium. I know that on paper they have all the same specs in terms of color depth, dynamic range and R3D workflow with the IPP2 pipeline. But I wanted to check how close can it actually get, since the Helium is at least 4 times more expensive camera. And I just could not believe that Komodo can produce the same image quality. To my surprise, they look almost identical. Slight adjustment in tint and I couldn't say which is which. Same incredible dynamic range with soft highlight roll-off. Then during the test I noticed that Komodo doesn't make any noise at all. Where my Helium kicked the fans to cool the camera down, which quite honestly is very annoying if you are in sound sensitive environment. So I was surprised that they managed to make it silent despite the size of the body. So I decided to make sure I'm not wrong, and I left this camera to record for 2 hours just to see maybe at some point it'll kick the fan off, but it didn't. Then I just realized that small Canon batteries run for a very long time, which I expected to be otherwise. I have to change big V-mount batteries twice more often on Helium than those small batteries on Komodo. And I didn't need to power the camera off since they are hot swappable. And it's really cool in the field when sometimes you can't interrupt during a take. Even the top screen is pretty cool and convenient to have to navigate through the super simple menus. I'm not saying that you won't have to have an external monitor, you better have one for sure, but you can manage to film only with that small top screen. So after playing with this camera, it was clear to me that I want to place an order for one, which I did, and then 3 months later I got mine. Mine was regular black body, which I personally liked more than the white body. The whole package with batteries, monitor mounts and other accessories comes at around $9,000, so it's not near actual $6,000 that you pay only for a body, but still relatively cheap for what you get. So for 3 months of using camera I realized why there are so many fans of this camera. Even my friends in high-end productions who tend to like only ARRI still like the little Komodo. It's just has the balance and you forgive the downsides considering the price. And for all this time having this camera, I noticed that I tend to use this camera the most. It's hard to explain, but for instance, I don't use my Helium too often when I don't need to. It's just because it wasn't cheap to buy. I don't want to put extra hours on it, but I don't have the same thing about Komodo. I don't mind to put as many hours as I want. Before Komodo, my most used camera was C300 Mark III, and probably the biggest advantage of this that it has built-in NDs, not even autofocus or super slow-mo abilities. But with Komodo I shoot mostly on EF glass, and its RF mount allows me to use RF to EF adapter with variable ND, which is super convenient to use. Yes, this variable ND is not the highest quality, and at some point if I need to shoot a feature film I would definitely use high quality R&D filters. But for most cases it's just enough. And overall, Red decision to make RF mount is a very smart decision. It's just so easy to adopt any kind of glass. Even putting a PL mount is so easy. Even with my Helium I have to unscrew and screw mount, which isn't hard, but with Komodo it's just a matter of seconds, switching from one mount to another. And I appreciate a lot that recently came out the speed booster from Canon. It's a 0.7x expander that pretty much makes your camera a full frame. It gives you also an extra stop of light. So for those who are obsessed with the full frame look, there you got it. Autofocus, yes, Komodo has autofocus, but it's not near the autofocus that you can get from a Canon R5 or even Canon C300 Mark III. But many people say it's pretty usable, however, I don't really use it. And so you understand, I've been a fan and pioneer of autofocus since Canon C200. I think it's incredible what autofocus can do and what it can unlock if you are a one-man band. And for years of using autofocus, I find myself using autofocus less and less lately, going back to the roots where I had only manual focus, where focus more controlled by me or focus puller. But there are still cases where I need to put a camera on a gimbal and I don't have a focus puller. For those cases I used my Canon C300 Mark III or Canon R5 on RS2. But when I tried DJI 3D focus with Komodo, and I realized that on the gimbal it works most of the times even better than autofocus on Canon or Sony. And I'm gonna do a separate video about this 3D focus for sure, because it's incredible. And by the way, it's so easy to balance Komodo on gimbal. Because of its square shape, it has a pretty even weight balance that helps. So moving on, with 3D focus, my Komodo became usable in pretty much all scenarios I needed, except slow motion. Yes, this camera lags in slow motion. It can record only up to 40 FPS in full sensor readout at 6K. But you already know that, right? Yes, C300 Mark III can record up to 120 FPS at 4K resolution, and it's a huge difference of what Komodo offers. But for a year of having Canon C300 Mark III, I used 120 FPS only a few times, most of which were I used it in the beginning where I tested the camera. So I asked myself a question: how really do I need this slow motion? I think slow motion is overused anyways. And even when I need a slow motion, it's about from 34 to 60 FPS. So I can manage to get away with Komodo limitations most of times. But I purposefully challenge myself using up to 40 FPS where I have to be more careful about camera movement. Global shutter. I think global shutter is a little bit underrated because not everyone actually understands what this is, but it's super cool because of the readout of the whole real estate of the sensor happens at the same time like it's done on film cameras. So your movement is way more organic and you don't have to raise shutter as much as you need to do with mechanical shutter when you're shooting fast action movements. But besides that, flash and strobes don't look funky, and even I noticed that most of the times that lights that usually flicker on mechanical shutter do not flicker on Komodo. So for instance, my Hue Philips lights flicker almost at all shutter speeds, and they do not flicker almost at any shutter speed with Komodo. And that makes life so much easier when we have some strange lights in the practical or weird frequencies that we have to deal with that. And overall, global shutter has many advantages over mechanical shutter, and I'm happy that RED managed to have the same dynamic range while having the global shutter, which is pretty cool, and no one actually done it. So basically, you having your global shutter only in Komodo, no other camera can offer that. No RE, no other REDs, no any other cameras. Eventually, the new generations of RED and probably RE will come up with something like a global shutter as well. But as of right now, Komodo is the only one that has it. Wireless connectivity. Wireless app is another topic in this camera. I appreciate a lot that the wireless connectivity is included in this camera because again, it makes life so much easier when camera is rigged somewhere like a a car mount or a jeep or somewhere on a tripod. Like right now here, it is on tripod, so I can see image with a decent delay, change all settings, and the rec start stop recording button. All these little things make me love using this camera more and more. Regardless how much I love Canon C300 Mark III, I decided to sell it and get another Komodo instead. I just found that Komodo fit in my workflow better. I can have more cameras that match seamlessly. I can involve it into bigger projects without much explanation how cool Canon is. Because RED is RED. Doesn't need to be introduced to 99% of clients. I'm still keeping my Canon R5 for sure, because it's always can be handy when the autofocus is needed and you need those 120 fps in 4K. By the way, I wanted to complain about Komodo doesn't have anamorphic support and the squeezing camera, but it has been fixed via recent software update. So in conclusions, Red Komodo is an incredible camera for very fair price that comes in a very small size that allowed me to use this camera on a small gimbal that made possible to use it on more affordable setups like a tilter car mount or riding a slider or small jeep without pushing the support system to its limits and keeping it safe. I'm happy that RED didn't compromise on image quality and it provides as good image as bigger and more expensive brothers in the RED family. Of course, it'll probably affect negatively on their sales for more expensive cameras, or maybe they don't care because they're cooking something special for higher end productions. Anyways, this camera isn't for everyone. It's far from being ideal, but somehow it just became my favorite camera. So that was my take on Red Komodo. I hope that information was helpful. Don't forget to subscribe, hit like and notification bell to support this channel grow. Thank you for your time. Bye.